Dealing with Dragons, Chapter 14, in which the wizards try to make trouble and Cimorene does something about it. Don't forget we are really in the middle of a scene for once we have a cliffhanger. Cimorene and Alienora and the Stone Prince have rushed to Morwen's cottage to try and get help as the wizards are interfering with the process of selecting a new king of the dragons, and we can't have that. So, Chapter 14. Chapter 14. The door of the cottage opened and Morwen stepped out. "What sort of emergency?" she asked. She studied Alienora and the Stone Prince for a moment, then peered at Cimorene over the tops of her glasses and added with some severity, "I hope you weren't referring to his predicament. He may well find it an inconvenience, but it certainly isn't an emergency. Not by my standards, anyway." "No," said Cimorene. "I was talking about the wizards. They've poisoned the king of the dragons, and now they're trying to interfere with Colin's stone so that Warrogh will be the new king. We have to stop them, but we don't know where they are, and Warrogh's going to try to carry the stone any minute. Can you find them for us?" Morwen blinked twice and shoved her glasses back into place with her forefinger. "I see," she said. "You're right, it is an emergency. I'll do what I can. But if you don't tell me the whole story later, when there's a bit more time, I shall turn you all into mice and give you to the cats. Wait here." As she spoke, Morwen disappeared into the house. She reappeared a moment later, holding a small mirror and muttering over it. "Colin's stone," she said, and breathed on the glass. She looked up. "Any wizard in particular?" "Zeminar, the head wizard of the Society of Wizards," Cimorene said, wishing Morwen would go faster and knowing she couldn't. "I should have guessed," Morwen said. She turned back to the mirror. "Zeminar," she said, and breathed on the glass once more. Then she motioned to Cimorene to come and look. Cimorene obeyed, and Alienora and the Stone Prince crowded closely behind her. The mirror showed a blurry, wavering picture of the Ford of Whispering Snakes. As Cimorene watched, the picture moved slowly along one bank of the river, past the waiting dragons and the immense trees of the enchanted forest, and on down the river. "Can't it go any faster?" Alienora whispered. "There's no need to whisper, and no, it can't," Morwen said. "Not if you want to be sure of finding these wizards of yours on the first try, and it doesn't sound as if you have time to waste on mistakes." The picture in the mirror continued to creep along the bank. Cimorene pulled the third and last feather out of her pocket, and brushed it nervously across her fingers while she waited. "What's that?" the Stone Prince said suddenly. The mirror picture stopped, then moved up the bank, away from the river, toward a thicket of blackberry brambles. Cimorene saw the tip of a wooden staff poking up above the thicket. Tensely, she waited for the mirror to show the far side of the brambles. "It's them!" Alienora said. She sounded frightened and excited at the same time. "Oh dear." Cimorene took a good look at the picture in the mirror. 5 wizards were standing in an opening behind the blackberry thicket, leaning on their staffs and looking at the sky. Suddenly, one of the wizards pointed. The others peered upward, nodded, and raised their staffs. "Get the buckets," Cimorene said. Cats scattered in all directions as the Stone Prince pounded across the porch behind Cimorene and Alienora. "Hang on, here we go. I wish. Not without me, you don't," Morwen said, grabbing Cimorene's shoulder. "We were at the blackberry thicket where the wizards are," Cimorene said, and dropped the feather. The porch winked out and was replaced by blackberries. The 5 wizards were standing in an arc just in front of the bramble. Each of them held his staff so that the lower end was about a foot above the ground, pointing at something hidden in the moss at their feet. An unpleasant yellow-green light dripped from the ends of the staffs, and the moss where the wizards were standing was brown and dead. The wizards' backs were toward Cimorene and her friends. "Now!" Cimorene cried. As the wizards began to turn, she set one of her buckets on the ground and lifted the other in both hands. Taking careful aim, she flung the soapy water over a black-haired wizard in the center of the arc. "Charge!" yelled the Stone Prince, and threw one of his buckets at the nearest wizard. "Take that, you cheats!" said Alienora, dumping the first of her buckets over another. "What? This is impossible!" said one of the wizards indignantly as he began to melt. "Too bad," Cimorene said, throwing her second load of water at the next-to-last wizard. "Watch where you're throwing that," Morwen said to the Stone Prince, who had sloshed his second bucket over the fifth wizard with such enthusiasm that water sprayed in all directions. "Sorry," the prince apologized. "Is that all of them?" "It's all 5 of the ones we saw," Cimorene said cautiously. "Then we did it," Alienora said. "Not quite," said Zeminar, stepping out of the bushes behind Morwen. "You interrupted the spell, of course, but we were nearly finished anyway. And as long as the stone remains enchanted, Warrogh won't have any trouble getting it all the way to the Vanishing Mountain. Look." He pointed with his staff, and Cimorene saw 3 dragons high in the air, flying steadily toward the mountains. One of them had a long black stone clutched in his claws, and the other 2 appeared to be escorting him at a careful distance. "Warrogh and the 2 judges?" Cimorene murmured. Zeminar nodded. "You might as well put that bucket down," he went on, turning to Alienora. "You can't throw it at me without melting your witch friend here. What's in it, by the way?" "I don't see why we should tell you," Cimorene said, as Alienora set the last of the 6 buckets down. "Because I'm interested, Princess," Zeminar said with an oily smile. "And it will pass the time until the next shift gets here, and I can decide what to do with you." "If you're that interested, why don't you take a closer look?" said the stone prince, picking up Alienora's bucket. "Stay where you are," Zeminar commanded. As he spoke, he raised his staff and sidestepped so that Morwen was between him and the stone prince. "If you insist," said the prince. He shrugged, lifted the bucket, and flung the water over Morwen and Zeminar at the same time. "What? No!" Zeminar cried in horror as he began to melt. "Not soapsuds! It's demeaning!" "There's a little lemon juice in it, too," Alienora offered. Zeminar glared at her. He was less than half his normal height and was shrinking as they watched, while a dark puddle spread out beneath him. "Lemon juice? Bah! How dare you do such a thing? I'm the head wizard of the Society of Wizards." His voice grew fainter and higher as he shrank. "Interfering busybodies? Soapsuds? Of all the undignified tricks! You'll be sorry for this! You can't melt a wizard forever, you know! You'll be sorry." The wizard's voice ceased. All that remained of him was a pile of silk robes and a long wooden staff lying on some damp moss. Alienora and Cimorene stared for a moment. Then Alienora turned to the stone prince. "I'm glad he's gone," she said. "But how could you melt Morwen just to get at that wizard?" "But I didn't," the stone prince said. "Look." Cimorene and Alienora turned. Morwen seemed no shorter than usual, though she certainly looked very damp. She had taken off her glasses and was shaking water off them. "Don't just stand there," she said crossly to Cimorene. "Hand me a dry handkerchief." "Just a moment," Cimorene said, checking her pockets. She found the handkerchief that had been wrapped around the magic feathers and handed it to Morwen. Why didn't you melt?" "Clean living," Morwen said as she began to dry her glasses on Cimorene's handkerchief. "I thought as much," the stone prince said in a satisfied tone. "Nobody who lives in a house as clean as yours could possibly melt in a bucket of soapsuds." "Quite right," Morwen said approvingly. "You have a good head on your shoulders, young man." "What's this?" She held up a sharp-edged black pebble. "It's a piece of stone I found in the Caves of Fire and Night," Cimorene said. "Where exactly?" "In the King's Cave," Cimorene said. "Morwen, shouldn't we do something about that spell Zeminar mentioned?" Alienora was watching the sky, shading her eyes with her hand. "Warrogh's nearly halfway to the mountains," she said anxiously. "Oh, good," said Morwen, though neither Cimorene nor Alienora could tell which of them she was talking to. The witch shook her wet robes and walked over to the patch of dead moss where the wizards had been working, picking her way carefully past little piles of robes and staffs. Cimorene followed. In the center of the brown area was a black stone the size of Cimorene's fist. A web of yellow-green light flickered across its smooth surface. "Sloppy," Morwen said. "Very sloppy. Though I'm not surprised. Wizards always seem to depend on brute force when a little subtlety would be far more effective." She fingered Cimorene's pebble for a moment, then reached out and dropped it on top of the wizard's stone. There was a noise like a great deal of popcorn all popping at once, and the light that flickered over the black stone spat yellow-green sparks in all directions. Alienora jumped and backed away. Cimorene would have liked to do the same, but she did not want to give Morwen a bad impression of her courage, so she stayed where she was. The sparks died and the flickering light went out. From the sky, high above, came a faint shriek of surprise and rage. Cimorene looked up and saw 3 black specks in the sky. No, not 3, 4. And the 2 escort dragons were swooping to catch the speck that was Colin's stone, which Warrogh had just dropped. Cimorene gave a sigh of relief and looked at Morwen. "So much for Warrogh and the wizard," she said. "We didn't even do the fireproofing spell. What did you do?" "And what happens now?" Alianor added. "Duck," said Morwen, and threw herself sideways into the bushes. "What?" said the stone prince, and then he and Cimorene and Alianor were engulfed by a blast of dragon fire. The stone prince leaped in front of the 2 princesses, but he was much too late to protect them. Fortunately, the fireproofing spell was still in effect, and neither of them even felt warm, though Alianor lost the ends of her sleeves and Cimorene's hemline rose 6 scorched inches. "I knew I shouldn't have said that about the fireproofing spell," Cimorene muttered. With a wordless snarl and a thunder of wings, Warrogh landed just in front of the little group. "You!" he shouted when he saw Cimorene. "I might have known it would be you!" Flame shot from his mouth once more, but it was just as useless as it had been the first time. Cimorene glanced up and saw one of the escort dragons spiraling down to see what was going on. "You might as well give up, Warrogh," she said, hoping to distract the angry dragon long enough for help to arrive. "You can't be king of the dragons now." "I'll tear you limb from limb," Warrogh raged. "Every last one of you." One arm shot out as he spoke, and shining silver claws wrapped around the stone prince's waist. Alianor screamed. "Hurry up!" Cimorene shouted at the dragon in the sky. The dragon heard and dived towards them, but he was not fast enough. Warrogh shoved the stone prince into his mouth and bit down hard. An instant later he howled in pain and spat out the prince and 4 teeth. "What is all this?" said the escort dragon, landing carefully beside Warrogh. The clearing was getting rather crowded. "This is a plot to cheat on the test to see who the next king of the dragons will be," Cimorene said. "Warrogh was in on it and a lot of wizards." "Are you all right?" Alianor asked the stone prince, who was just picking himself up. His stone was black in places from the dragon fire, but otherwise he seemed unhurt. "More or less," the stone prince said. "But just look at what that fire did to my clothes. And that dragon's put a chip in my sleeve. What am I supposed to do about that? It's not as if I can just change clothes when I get home, you know." "That's ridiculous," the escort dragon told Cimorene. "No dragon would cooperate with wizards." "I don't see any wizards either. I think you're making it up." "Of course you don't see any wizards," Cimorene said, feeling very cross. "We melted them." "Melted them? Where do you think those staffs come from?" Cimorene pointed at the wizard's staffs lying across the scattered brown puddles. The dragon backed up a pace and sniffed experimentally. "It's all quite true," Morwen said, poking her head out of the bushes. "And we'll be more than happy to explain the whole thing to your new king just as soon as you have one. Provided, of course, that you take that maniac away before he burns the whole enchanted forest to the ground." She gestured to Warrogh. "Cimorene, I really must insist on getting a copy of that fireproofing spell. It will clearly be worth every minute of the month's hunting it will take me to find some hen's teeth, and I may as well get started as soon as I can." "Who's that?" said the escort dragon. "Morwen? That does it. This is too much for me. I'm taking you all into custody until the trials are over and the king can sort it out. Come along." "I assume that doesn't apply to me," Warrogh rumbled. He winced as he spoke. "It certainly does," the escort dragon said. "I said all, and I meant all. If I'd meant all the humans, I'd have said all the humans. Or maybe some of you, or you over there, or all you non-dragons, or—" "Nonsense!" Warrogh interrupted. "Don't you know who I am?" "You're the dragon who caused a ruckus just now for no reason I can see," the escort dragon replied. "And it's my duty and my job to take you into custody. When the trials are over, you can explain it to the king, and if I've done something wrong, well, I'll take what I have coming. And if I haven't, you'll take yours. And—" All right, Warrogh said. But I warn you, you'll regret this." "That's as may be," the escort dragon said with dignity. "Right now, though, you're in custody, along with the rest of these people, and you'd better not go snacking on any of them until things are sorted out. I saw what you did to the Grey One." "Did you?" said the Stone Prince. "Then what are you going to do about this chip in my sleeve?" "Tell it to the king," the escort dragon advised. "Now, off we go, the lot of you." Morwen came cautiously out of the bushes, brushing leaves from her already wet black robes. She stopped and peered at the escort dragon over the tops of her glasses. "This has not been a good day for anyone's clothes," she said severely. "I shall send the cleaning bill to your king." "Whatever you want," the escort dragon said impatiently. "Come on." Scowling furiously, Warrogh marched off into the forest. The Stone Prince and Alienora followed, talking in low voices. Morwen paused to pick up the wizard's black rock and Cimorene's pebble, then went on after them. Cimorene hesitated. "Go on," said the escort dragon. "I will, but I think you ought to know that another batch of wizards is supposed to show up soon," Cimorene said. "Zeminar said something about a second shift. I don't know what they can do without the stone they were using, but I'm sure they'll try something." "Wizards always do," the escort dragon said with a sigh. He studied the wizard staffs that were lying around the clearing with a melancholy air. "All right, I'll send someone back to keep an eye on things as soon as we get to the ford. Whatever was going on here, there certainly were wizards in it, and that's enough for me." "Good," said Cimorene. "And thank you." She smiled at the startled expression on the dragon's face, and started after the others.